Hello, everyone. I'm Mac, and this is Gino.
And this is the Front Desk Podcast.
Welcome, everyone. I hope you're gonna enjoy your stay. We're running a hotel today. We decided we're just a couple of boys who decided to start a podcast. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Are you excited, Gino?
I've never been as excited for anything in my life.
Me neither. This is gonna be a fun time. So, here's how our podcast is gonna work. So every time that we record, every couple of weeks or so, we're too lazy to do every week, so
It's too much.
probably just gonna do every couple of weeks. We're going to split our hotel into multiple floors, and each floor is gonna be its own topic. So as we start off each podcast, we'll be in the lobby, where we're just gonna talk about random general discussion on things. But as we move on through the hotel, we're gonna go to multiple floors. We'll have floors for technology, for video games, for television, maybe some anime because I'm a filthy weeaboo.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but and then we'll have a roof where we'll do a fire escape where we'll usually maybe talk about things we're looking forward to, or maybe just things we're afraid of, or maybe something we'll actually light on fire and then we'll have
Yes.
to actually run.
Yeah, we'll actually have to escape, and it'll be just an hour of radio silence.
That might happen. All right, so since this is the first episode, it's our pilot episode, it's the end of the year right now, or actually the beginning of the year. 2016 just ended, and as we all know, 2016 was a great year, isn't that right?
It was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, this episode's going to be a year in review. We're going to talk about 2016, a lot of our favorite things from 2016. And we're going to start off by moving on to floor 2, which is our technology floor, the floor above the ground floor. We're going to talk about our things in technology that we enjoyed from 2016. So let's move on to that. You wanna start us off, Gino?
Well, I don't know if I'd go as far to say things that I enjoyed. So for the first topic, some of you may know a certain smartwatch company ended their lives in 2016. And that would be my good dear friend, the Pebble. So, if you're not familiar, the Pebble was kind of it was actually the wearable that started the smartwatch kind of fad. There wasn't really anything quite like it when it had come out. It was a Kickstarter project, something that could send notifications to your phone, things like that. And everyone else kind of caught on and started doing their own thing, which kind of helped the end of Pebble. Pebble couldn't really keep up. They were, the reason I liked the Pebble, it was practical. It was the ink screen, similar to like the Kindle. It was always on. It'd send notifications to your phone, things like that. Didn't have a lot of fluff, had a long battery life. But unfortunately, project after project, which was another issue, is every single time they had a new watch, they went to Kickstarter, which is not really a good business motive. Like, you can't keep begging people for money every time you want to come up with something new. And you can't be selling all of your devices essentially lower than you would in the market. Because, if you're banking on a Kickstarter, you're getting it for a lower price. So there was just a lot that kind of contributed to the demise of this smartwatch company. And they were purchased by Fitbit, but it, wasn't like a super, I don't want to say it's not a smooth acquisition. So they only bought certain assets of Pebble. So they didn't buy the branding. They just kind of bought some of the software parts of it and some of the employees. But Pebble as we know it is dead.
May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace.
Poor Pebble. I was never a fan of smartwatches in the first place. So I couldn't care less.
That's the thing. Smartwatches they're kind of a fad, and that was one of the things why I like the Pebble is it was a lot more practical than a lot of the smartwatches that you see today.
Like the Apple Watch.
You don't have to. You didn't have a, my Pebble doesn't need a charge every morning. It doesn't, I don't need to flick my wrist to see what time it is. It's just there. So, Rip.
But did the Pebble receive text messages?
It did.
Did it receive Discord updates?
It did.
Oh, well then. Maybe it's a little better than I thought it was.
Oh, yeah. All notifications would get pushed to it. Now, could I respond? I could. You could respond to text messages, but it was, just kind of canned messages. So you had, pre-written out things like, hey, what's up? Or can't talk right now. But it also had voice dictation, so you could speak to it and it would send whatever you say, which for the most part worked pretty well. But, when I would be checking it was like in class or something, and I'm not going to start talking to my wrist during a lecture. So I never really used it all that much. But yeah, it was pretty handy. But I will say it has not been working quite the same since the acquisition. It's reset a handful of times. I've had to go in and delete watch faces and re-upload watch faces, and so it's been a mess.
It happens.
But yeah, so that's it. That's the Pebble. That's all I want to say. I don't want to talk about it too much. Probably have already talked about it more than I've needed to. So
well, I know that you really like the Pebble. I know you.
I was very upset. I'm going to be honest. I was pretty upset. Not that I have a huge problem with Fitbit. Most of the reasons why there's been so much backlash is the fact that Fitbit bought Pebble, and I can't say I'm one to really use Fitbit. I know their hardware isn't that great. There's a lot of issues with it. People constantly, things are breaking. They have a really good customer service policy. They're constantly, my parents both use Fitbit. Every time something goes wrong, they send them a new one. Granted, why are things constantly going wrong? I don't know. I can't say I have a huge issue with Fitbit, but I don't know. I think people really liked Pebble for its open source nature. Fitbit's not like that. Fitbit is Fitbit. You run their shit. That's it. But yeah, done with Pebble. No more Pebble talk.
No more Pebble.
I can't do this to myself.
Rip Pebble.
Rip Pebble.
What else did you want to talk about, Gino?
Okay, so the other tech thing, and again, it's not something I'm necessarily excited for, but in 2016 we saw the PlayStation 4 Pro, which it's not the first time we've seen a mid-cycle console upgrade, but it might be for a home console. So we've seen this. Nintendo's done this before, specifically with their 3DS. I think maybe it was 2 or 3 years after the 3DS released, and they came out with the new Nintendo 3DS XL, which had some slightly better processing. It had better 3D. It had 2 extra bumper buttons and a C-stick. So it was pretty significant of an upgrade, even though, has it been utilized really to its fullest? Probably not. But essentially my point is it's not like the PS4 Pro is like this unknown entity. Like, we've never seen something quite like it. But when it comes to home consoles, pretty much, when a console releases, you can expect in about 2, 3, maybe 4 years, you're going to see a slim model released. I mean, we've seen that ever back since, the NES, the original Nintendo Entertainment System, had a smaller sized model that came out. It's not an uncommon thing, but to have something that actually has different guts to it was different. And for people, especially for console gamers, one of the reasons people who are into console gaming is because you buy what you get, and that's going to last you for a decent amount of time, at least 6 years. That's the hopes, at least. And so, when Sony kind of announced this PlayStation 4 Pro that had, better internals and was going to be able to output games at 4K and all this stuff, people were kind of taken aback, like, whoa, I just bought this system not that long ago. You're already telling me there's a newer one. And, Sony claims that you have to, every game that is going to be made has to work on the original PlayStation 4, which is good. But if this is anything like, similarly going back to the new 3DS XL, we've seen certain games like the Hyrule Warriors 3DS port. Technically works on both systems, but runs terribly on the original 3DS. And so you kind of have to play it on the new 3DS XL if you actually want the game to run properly. I don't know if we're going to see anything that extreme with the PlayStation 4 Pro. So far, the games that have come out for it have utilized it to some extent. I think the idea of getting native 4K on that system is kind of a pipe dream. As you know, even some of the higher end computers, it takes quite a lot out of them. And I think people are really hoping just to get 1080p, 60 FPS, which is something that really should have been expected when these systems launched, but it's just not there.
They're pushing higher resolution instead of higher frames.
And that's the big thing is, I think, Last Guardian, you can play in 4K, and hope to get 30 FPS. And I think even like the 1080p mode is still 30 FPS. Mm-hmm. We're not even seeing
which is dumb.
Yeah, I think the hope really with the system is like, hey, 1080p 60 frames. I can tell you, I'm not going to go out and buy a PlayStation 4 Pro anytime soon.
Neither am I. But
I have a PlayStation 4. I don't, as of right now, I don't really see a huge need to upgrade. I don't have a 4K TV. I don't think 4K TVs really are as ubiquitous as maybe Sony thinks they are.
Not yet.
Not yet. And maybe they are just kind of hoping, hey, in the next few years, people are going to be buying a lot of 4K TVs, and I don't know, maybe Sony themselves are planning on throwing out a whole bunch of 4K deals on their TVs. But as of right now, personally, I haven't seen anything that's caught my eye. And other than that, I don't really see paying another $400 just for some minor performance enhancements. I am worried down the line that it's going to be significant game improvements, and the standard PS4 is not really going to cut it as much, but I don't really know if that's going to happen. So just kind of an interesting thing that happened this year with our home consoles.
Yeah. To segue from the console peasants sitting over here on his little chair. I'm a PC gamer. You may not know that, but now you know that. So going on to technology, there were actually a lot of new graphics cards and processors that were released this past year in 2016 for the PC that can do far more than the PS4 Pro can do, that just far surpass it, such as the GTX 1070 or 1080, which came out and were amazing. I have a friend who got a 1070, put it in his computer, and he's had great fun with it. So the GTX 1080, and I think also the GTX Titan X, which is already out, are able to support 4K gaming at 60 FPS, not 30 FPS like the PS4 Pro.
Okay. How much does the GTX 1080 cost?
A little bit. A little much, maybe $700 or $800. So it's
okay.
So maybe it's not.
So maybe like twice as much as the system itself, but
it's certainly not cheap. But the idea is that the cards will get cheaper as new cards come out, because as you know, every year and a half technology improves by twice as much. But it's really good that they're pushing out these new graphics cards still. I thought that I read somewhere, though, that they're actually getting limited by resources for these processors and these chips. I know that Intel released their new generation of Skylake processors this year, so they're into the 6000s with their processors, like the 6700 and whatever. And it's very good, because with these new graphics cards comes something very cool to me, which is virtual reality. So 2016 was the year of virtual reality, as you may know. The Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive had their official releases this year.
And The PlayStation VR.
And the PSVR, of course, which actually I'm not going to make fun of the PSVR, even though it's inferior, simply because it's cheaper and it makes it so that normal people who aren't super into VR can get into VR, and it'll help in the long run. I actually now own an HTC Vive within the last couple of weeks. I got it for Christmas. God bless my family. Love them to death. So the HTC Vive, which, as some of you may know, is basically objectively the best virtual reality headset on the market right now. You can't even really argue because it has features that no other VR headset has. The Rift is really the only headset that's rivaling the HTC Vive right now, and a lot of people aren't fans of Oculus because, same with Pebble and Fitbit acquiring Pebble, Facebook acquired Oculus.
Yeah.
And people are not happy about that because you don't want to put on your VR headset and then broadcast, sign in with Facebook and then be like, you'll tell people what you're playing, everything that you're doing, and people don't want that.
It's unfortunate because I feel like that is one of the most significant things holding the Oculus back. Because I know recently, I think they just had their motion control devices come out.
Yeah. And that's the big difference between the Rift and the Vive, was the fact that the Vive has the room scale VR, so you can play in a room that I think is up to 5 meters by 5 meters, which is significant because that's a very large playing space, and the Rift can't play in a play space anywhere near to that. And they also didn't used to have motion controllers. Motion controllers came out in the past month or 2 months or so, and it's just, you pretty much can't even argue. The Vive is way better, and that's my favorite part about the Vive that I have so far is the motion controllers. Gino hasn't tried it out yet, so
I haven't.
He's going to soon, the next couple of days. But the motion controllers are so good with the Vive that you have the headset on, you're holding the controllers in your hand, and you can throw a controller in the air without the wrist strap on or anything and catch it in VR in real time as if the controller, as if you could actually see it, because it models the controller perfectly on the screen for you. And I think it's crazy that the latency is so good that it can do that. It tracks it perfectly. It's so fun. And some games do so well with just how they handle the motion controls, like menu design. I've played a couple of games which they take the controller and they put the menu on one of the controllers, it's floating above the controller. So you can have an in-game menu to adjust settings like graphics options or key bindings or any of the sort. And you can take the other controller and use it as a pointer for the menu and point and click things. And I just find that to be really cool. I don't know about you, Gino, but that's just, I don't know.
No, I think it's somewhat necessary to really get that full immersion. It's kind of surprising, I guess, that it's taken this long for Oculus to release their motion controllers. I do think it's funny that, people now are probably spending, I don't know how much more for the PlayStation Move controllers that are used with the PSVR. As you may know, back in the PS3 era, that was Sony's very late response to the Nintendo Wii. Microsoft had their Kinect, PlayStation had their PS Move, and it was just kind of a bust. It was DOA. No one really ever used it. There were very few games that supported it. I think Killzone 3, you could use it almost like a light gun, but other than that, it just was, it was just kind of like this silly trinket. Now all of a sudden, it's the motion controls for PlayStation VR. So kind of neat that they were able to reincorporate those. Again, seems like somewhat necessary for virtual reality. Surprised Oculus didn't have it. Another big thing, too, with Oculus is the exclusivity with games. I've heard people are pretty upset that Oculus has been buying out a lot of games to be exclusive for the Oculus Rift. I know there's ways around it. I think it's Revive is the program maybe that you can use to play these games. But, another big reason why people, who are into PC gaming are into PC gaming is because they're not really into the whole console exclusive gaming. Not that people who play on consoles are necessarily into exclusives, but it's something that you're just not really used to on a PC, and the fact that, you have exclusive games for these headsets is not really too thrilling for a lot of people. Yeah. But, No, I think there's a bright future ahead. Like you said, the more people that get their hands on VR, the more likely it's actually going to play somewhat of a significant role in gaming. Yeah.
Yeah, it's VR is very cool, and it's far exceeded my expectations. And probably the most disappointing part about VR right now is just the fact that there aren't really any games for it. There's no long-term games. Pretty much every VR game I've played so far, I've played Abode, Audio Shield, the Gallery Episode 1, Relatively, Space Pirate Trainer. All these games, they're fun. They're really, really cool, but they're only fun for like an hour or two. Like Abode, it's an escape the room game, which you may or may not be familiar with, Gino, but it's you just have to escape this room that you're in by solving a bunch of puzzles in VR, and it's very cool. Probably the coolest experience of virtual reality, but it takes you an hour to beat it, and you beat it, and then it's like, that's it. Like, there's really no replay value. It's just it's almost like it's all demos for the most part.
It's pretty much tech demos.
That's why I was saying the PSVR is still a good thing, even though it's inferior to the Vive and the Rift, because like the PSVR doesn't have as good of a screen as the Vive and the Rift do. It doesn't have as good of a field of view. I don't think it has motion controls either. Not good motion controls. The tracking's not near.
It's probably not quite as accurate, but I think it gets the job done. I think the Move controllers are. I haven't played it. I don't know too much, but it is again half the cost of the other VRs that are out there. Well, at least half the cost of the Vive. I think. What's the Oculus? 600.
It's like 600 or so.
Yeah, and PSVR is 400, which is not cheap. I mean, that is the cost of the console. But again, you could get a PS4, a PS4 Pro, and the PlayStation VR for the same cost as just the Vive. So that's kind of what they're trying to do. It's like, no, it's not going to be as good as a VR experience, but it's going to be something that more people are going to be more apt to try.
Yeah.
Because it's not like I could, like right now, if I were to go out and buy an HTC Vive, I couldn't play it
because you don't have a computer.
I don't have
$1,200 computer.
Exactly. So that's the big thing. That's the thing. A lot of people, and the thing is, a lot of people already have PlayStation 4s. I mean, they've sold millions and millions of systems. So it's nice to see one of the big two kind of get into that playing field, and they are funding games to be made. Resident Evil 7 is going to be a VR game on the PlayStation 4.
Which I'll be too afraid to play. I haven't even played a horror game yet because I'm too afraid to play them.
It's pretty terrifying. I've played the demo, and I was like, I don't know how I could do this. I've never tried VR either, so I don't really even know what it's like to experience something like that. But
it's pretty immersive. Another one I forgot to mention was Vivecraft, which is Minecraft in the Vive, and for anyone who's played Minecraft, it's obviously a fun game, but it really puts in perspective how big the Minecraft world is, and it can also be pretty terrifying when you're stuck in a cave.
And I think they're supposed to be getting official support, right? Because that's like a mod, isn't it, Vivecraft?
It is a mod. It's a really, really good mod. A lot of people say it's the best experience on VR right now, which I can kind of agree with, aside from the one game that I played. But it's very cool, and I'm looking forward to the future of VR. I know CES was happening this week, or this past week, and a lot of cool things were announced. Like Vive has a new head strap, and they have integrated sound, because the Rift, that's the one thing the Rift has over the Vive, is it actually has built-in headphones, which you may not know about. The Vive doesn't. It just has a little female audio jack on the end for you to plug in your own headphones or earbuds. But they came out with a new head strap now, which is going to change things. They also have released motion trackers, which are going to be, there's like these little puck things that you put on an object, and it maps the object, so you can put it on like your wrist, and it will map your hand, and you can move your hand, and you'll see it in real time, like on the actual Vive itself. It's pretty cool. The demos I've seen so far are very cool, but that's 2017 technology. It's not released yet. We don't know the prices yet, but I'm very much looking forward to it. It's going to be a great time. I cannot wait for better VR things. Hopefully the PSVR introduces more people to it. People realize how cool it is. Not even going to mention like Samsung Gear VR, because that's just like as neat of a little experience it might be. It's rinky dinky. It's not very very cool.
I don't think anyone's going to be like, you might as well just get Google Glass.
Yeah, I saw Gear VR compared to, like, it's a McDonald's toy compared to just HTC Vive is essentially what it is. But I mean, obviously HTC Vive's like a $2,000 investment, so hopefully that comes down in the future.
Well, the only way it'll come down is if more people buy it, because then more will be produced.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our technology segment.
All right. So I guess we're going to move up to the third floor, which is movies.
Yeah, movies. Have a fun time with the movies. So let's take an elevator ride up to floor number 3. So why don't you... I don't have a lot to talk about with movies. I'm just a baby boy who
saw a handful
only
of
saw a
things.
handful of movies in 2016. But
that's okay.
Start us off, Gino, with the movies.
So the way I have what I did for 2016 is I have my biggest disappointment, and then I just did my top 5 movies of the year, and then I also included an honorable mention, and we might talk about some other films, some things Mac saw that I also saw that I won't have on this list. But to get started, I think I'll start with my biggest disappointment, and that will be Blair Witch. So, I am a huge fan of the original, Blair Witch Project, the first super successful found footage film. And there was just something about it, I think, the fact that it just seems so real. It just kind of is one of my favorite things to watch during the month of October, around Halloween. And so, hearing that there's going to be a new one, I was really kind of nervous at first. I was like, do we really need a follow-up to the Blair Witch Project? The Blair Witch Project seems something that just kind of fit on its own by itself. Then they, and I don't know if you heard, leading up to the Blair Witch, it was actually called The Woods.
Yeah.
So it was like a secret, like the existence of Blair Witch was a secret. So, all the press, everything was The Woods, and I believe it was at Comic-Con this past year where they were like, oh, hey, The Woods, it's the new Blair Witch. And the guy that directed it, and I cannot remember his name, he also directed You're Next and The Guest. And The Guest, especially, is probably one of my favorite films of the past decade. And I loved You're Next as well. So I was like, okay, it's in good hands. If anyone is going to do this right, it's going to be him. And oh man, could it have gone any worse? It was just, it felt like a movie, which sounds like a stupid thing, but the first one felt like it was literally like kids' film that was found in the woods. This one, it had so many jump cuts, so many jump scares. It was insane. I mean, like, the first one really just kind of relied on tension. It relied on people yelling at each other and being lost in the woods, being stressed out, and you're just like, oh. But the new one, it was just kind of like, hey, here's a loud noise. It's going to make you jump. And, oh, we're going to cut the camera real fast. And it was just, and there were so many cameras, which I guess, maybe modern day kids, they're going to have a lot more equipment than they would have in the 90s. But it was just a little much. And there was a soundtrack. There was music. At one point, so, one of the kids has a drone, which, isn't really that far-fetched. Everyone has drones nowadays. And
I don't have a drone.
Well, neither of us have drones, but that's okay. And they're flying it up in the woods, and all of a sudden, music starts playing. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, at that point, like, this isn't a found footage film. Like, this is a movie. Like, you're making a movie that's supposed to somewhat come across as a found footage film. Like, in no way am I actually... It's just, like, completely took me out of the experience. I was just, like, pissed. And, they do all this stuff, and it gets to the end of the film, And, one of the things that, again, a lot of people hated this in the first film is, mild spoiler for a film that's been out for like 20 years. They never show the Blair Witch.
Mm-hmm.
You never see it. Guess what you see in the new one?
The Blair Witch.
The Blair Witch. Now, I will say, I do like the design that they went with the witch. So I wasn't like super pissed off, but it was kind of like everything, like every point of the Blair Witch Project that I was a fan of, they were like, no. And they didn't do that for the sequel. And so, hey, was it better than Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows? Sure. But at the end of the day, I was so disappointed. If the guy, if the people that were attached to it weren't attached to it, I don't think I would have been as disappointed. I was never particularly looking forward to this film. And then I was like, oh, The Guest? Yeah, I love that movie. I've seen it like 3 times in the past year. But now it's just like...
They ruined a classic film.
Well, the thing is, the Blair Witch Project still holds up. I will say one more thing. So, they do this thing in the movie... I don't really want to spoil it, but if you haven't seen The Blair Witch, you're not really missing anything, so I'm just going to say it. So it's kind of revealed in the new film that the witch is able to control time in the woods.
Okay.
So so like, all of a sudden it's like night constantly. Like, there's no daylight. Like, it's just, she's able to push back time and pull back time. It's kind of like this weird portal thing. And so in the first film, the kids stumble upon the house of the old man who killed all these little kids. And they never really say it in the film, but apparently, according to like the fake Blair Witch documentary that they did after release, that building had burnt down like decades before the time that the building took place, which they don't really actually say in the movie. So when you see like this fake documentary that you were like, oh, how did these kids find this house if it burnt down? And so the new one kind of solves that, and it's like, oh, the witch can control time. She like pulled back time to where the house wasn't burned down and the kids found it, which was... I probably would have found it neater had I known that ahead of time, but I don't know. Still
sounds like a bit of a cop-out to me.
Yeah, it is. It really, again, I think the Blair Witch Project is best left as it is. Alone.
For now. So you get the Blair Witch 3 when aliens attack?
Well, based on what they did with the new Blair Witch, it wouldn't be a stretch. Honestly, at one point, there were flashing lights, and I was like, oh my god, it's going to be aliens. I was convinced. We're going to talk about this movie in a little bit. I thought they were pulling like a 10 Cloverfield Lane. And I was like, I'm actually not that mad. Like, I was, for some reason, okay with that turn of events, because, like, it's not like they were already holding true to anything else. So it was like, hey, if you really want to jump the shark, go for it. And they didn't, so...
So you're actually disappointed there weren't aliens now?
Low-key, yeah.
All right. So... What was your top 5?
Well, first, and you can talk about this too, what didn't make my top 5, but I guess would probably be my 6th, was 10 Cloverfield Lane, which you saw. It was, I really liked that movie. Everyone that was in it was really good. John Goodman was terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
What's her name? Mary Elizabeth Winstead, I think?
Yeah.
That's her name? Ramona from...
Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Yes.
Winstead, not Winston.
I said Winstead. It might not have sounded like it, but I said Winstead. Anyway, she was great. The guy was great. It was only 3 people in the whole film, pretty much. Terrifying. I mean, like, he really makes you so just nervous and tense the whole time. And I don't know about you. I loved the ending.
Oh yeah, it was. I actually enjoyed I was kind of hoping that kind of ending was going to happen.
And the thing, so I walked out of the theater, and it wasn't packed, but there was a decent amount of people in there, and I was kind of expecting, everyone to be like, "Oh man, like that was awesome," and I was really the only one that felt that way. Everyone else was like, "Oh my god, that movie was terrible. That ending was so stupid," and I was like, "What?" And but for me, I would have been disappointed had we not seen that ending because it was a Cloverfield film. And I don't know if people just didn't realize it was connected to Cloverfield that came out in, I think, 2007. I think we were all expecting something a little odd to happen. And so had they not done that, I would have been like, oh. So, I don't know. I guess maybe they didn't market it that well, but they did. I mean, when they showed the trailer, they showed Cloverfield and then 10 and then Lane. So, there was no, secret about it. People just can't expect everyone to be a movie fan. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Cloverfield, I actually really enjoyed Cloverfield. And so, when 10 Cloverfield Lane came around, I'm like, and it was so mysterious. My favorite thing about the trailers was the fact that you had no idea what was going to happen. It's just they have Cloverfield in the lane. Or not in the lane, in the name.
Hey, well, it is in the lane.
It is in the lane. It's also in the name. And I'm just like, there's got to be something weird here. And the entire time I'm watching that movie, I'm like, what's going to happen? When's it going to happen? Is it going to turn out that this guy's just a creep? Is it going to turn out that this guy was right? I had no idea what was going to happen. And that was
so many twists and turns. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was very tense. I mean, the spoilers for the movie itself, that scene where he's standing in front of the acid tank and he's got the guy whose name I can't remember standing in front of him and the girl as well, and they're just standing there. I was so tense. I was so afraid he's just gonna take this guy and he's just gonna dunk his face in the acid.
I have not jumped quite like that.
Oh man, it was.
I loved it. I loved that film. But yeah, that is, as much as I loved it, technically my honorable mention. I'll try my best not to spend too much time on each of these. For number 5, I have Deadpool, which I was not surprised, but pleasantly surprised. I thought they really did everything right. I thought the movie was really funny. I was kind of worried at first because everyone has this odd misconception about the character. Everyone was like, oh, Deadpool needs to be R, and it needs to be, grotesque and raunchy and all these things. And I was like, I mean, it doesn't have to be. I feel like it was a lot of these people that had this, they would see these Deadpool memes on the internet.
Yeah.
But have never actually read any comic books featuring the character, which I have. And so I was like, not that it would be bad if they did it this way, but I just don't think it's necessary. And then, they went and they did it that way. They did the, R-rated Deadpool. And it really, really worked. It was, for me, none of the jokes really fell flat. The violence was, exciting. I just really liked it. It obviously didn't take itself too seriously, but it had a decent enough story that kept you going forward, and I'm excited to see what they do next. So, that was Deadpool.
Okay.
Number 4 is The Invitation. So, you probably aren't familiar with this movie. It was a smaller release, came out the earlier part of 2016. I tried to see it in theaters, honestly, and it was not playing anywhere near me. So I ended up seeing it on Netflix in October. So every October I watch horror movies for the month because, Halloween and everything. Yeah. And I watched The Invitation, and it's very, very, very good. It's a suspense film. I don't really want to give everything away. It's just, I don't really know. I'm trying to think of what to say without saying anything about the movie. Just see it.
Add a spoiler alert and talk about it.
No, it's all I'll say is, you expect things and then they don't happen, and then so you expect something else and then it doesn't happen. it keeps you on your toes, and it's a film that seems very predictable, but then isn't.
So it's just constantly, it leaves you on the edge of your seat.
It does. And it's just really well done. It's more cerebral than it is in your face. It's not like a horror movie. It's more of like it's a suspense. It's a thriller. It's, kind of like, do you consider Silence of the Lambs a horror film? Yes. Okay, then it's probably a horror film. Not so much, then it would fall in that category. So that was my number 4. Number 3, I have The Nice Guys. Shane Black, who did the original Lethal Weapon films. Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe are a pair of, well, one of them is a private detective. The other one is just kind of a thug, but he works for people and takes people out that they want taken out, kind of like a hitman. But it's funny. It's I don't want to say feel good. It's kind of like the closest thing I think we'll get to like a new Lethal Weapon. It's like this buddy action kind of film, but the main characters, they really flow well. They work well together. It takes place, I want to say, the 70s, and that setting just kind of fits really well. It's kind of almost groovy. Yeah, it's just fun. I think I just constantly was laughing while watching the film. It's not, it's not your conventional comedy, I guess you could say. It's a lot funnier than like Lethal Weapon, if that makes. I don't know if you've ever seen the original.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. Lethal Weapon is like an action movie first and has comedic value to it, where The Nice Guys feels like a comedy first, but with action elements in it. But it works really well. Unfortunately, did not do very well at the box office. Was not a very successful film. So hopefully, if they ever do a sequel, I'll go see it.
Or maybe you just have bad taste and you just like bad movies.
The thing is, I didn't actually see The Nice Guys in theaters. I'm one of the reasons. I contributed to that. I wanted to, and I just didn't get around to it. I picked it up on Blu-ray when it came out. But anyway, enough about The Nice Guys. Number 2, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which you also saw.
Yeah, I did.
I was... Honestly, so of my friends that I saw it with, all of them were like cautiously optimistic. I guess they really weren't expecting much out of the film, which I the whole time was really looking forward to it, and I think it exceeded my expectations, in which it made itself feel relevant, and it was relevant. It worked itself into the story of Star Wars appropriately. I know a lot of people kind of had issues with, not so much that they had issues with the characters, they had issues with the lack of characterization. I know that was one of the things that you had told me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want
to... That was... Like, Rogue One was... my friends like to say that I actually hated that movie. I did not hate Rogue One. I actually really liked it. It was a very good movie, but one of the biggest issues I had with it was in the first half, maybe not the first half, but the first at least, 30 minutes or so, I was just kind of confused on what was going on. They were hopping planet to planet. They were introducing dozens of characters, and it's just I'm like, when are we gonna get somewhere? I also felt like the opening was a little weak. I don't know about you. I always feel like maybe I want something strong from a Star Wars opening. I want to feel some actual threat, but maybe that just wasn't present in that movie. I don't know about you.
I'm trying to think which was the opening sequence? Was the opening sequence with Jyn as a little kid?
As a little kid.
That was the opening sequence.
And her father was there,
mm-hmm.
and then General comes down and he's like, all right.
Yeah, that was definitely a little predictable. It was just kind of like, hey, what's going to happen here? Well, we know that's the main character, so she'll be fine. No, I know, I can see what you mean. It definitely takes a bit to hit its stride. But I think once it does, I really liked all the characters. The droid, was it K2SO9? I think it's.
Yeah, the comedic relief.
Oh, he was hilarious. I don't think I ever, rolled my eyes at any of his jokes. I think everyone hit so well. I liked the blind ninja kind of guy and his friend, the guardians of the temple and everything, and the pilot who, wanted to avenge his past life. I think even though these people didn't have like a ton to their background, you could understand why they were fighting in that fight.
Oh yeah.
And that was enough for me. And then the whole thing with the Death Star plans, it kind of answers that age-old question, like, how were they able to figure this out? Like, why was there this fatal flaw in this giant death trap? And
even before the movie, I think people predicted that that's what was going to be the case, that her father was he built in this weakness.
Well, I didn't ever predict that. So for me, it was like, oh, hey, that's awesome. Like, I was like, oh, it makes so much sense, and it was really cool. And honestly, the way that film ended was just like...
Oh, the ending was amazing.
I don't think I ever could have really expected that. That huge long sequence of just the battle. Like, constant, like, firefight and people dying and stuff. It was like, this is cool. Like, that's the side of Star Wars that we've never really seen in a film. I mean, like, that's probably really what they should have done with, like, the Clone Wars.
And then there's Darth Vader and his
gosh.
terrifying nature.
That was great. I will ask, though, when they're on Mustafar and he's in, like, his little bathtub and Krennic comes to visit him and he, like, walks out, did you think his helmet looked off?
Not particularly, no.
I don't know what it was. I don't know if I'm crazy, but for some reason, the shape of his helmet was like, I don't know if it was too wide or if the overall helmet was too small.
Well, it was was there a different actor within
I
the
believe it was a
suit
different
itself?
actor. Oh, yeah. I want to say the guy that played Darth Vader died.
No, not
the voice. The voice is the same,
alive,
but the guy, James Earl Jones, never was in the suit. I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't even think they had the same guy in the suit from 4 through 6. I think it changed once, but it might not have.
Well, then the other question is, did they use the same costume from before? I doubt they used the same costume.
I don't think so. I don't know. I could just be crazy.
You're probably just crazy. We all know how crazy you are, Gino.
True. But yeah, that was my number 2. My number 1, Swiss Army Man. I loved it. It was... I don't think I could describe it better, as it was just a feel-good movie. The whole time I was just like constantly smiling. The soundtrack, I think a lot of people, everyone loves to talk about movie soundtracks. And, I think a lot of movie soundtracks are great, but the way the music was integrated into the film was just kind of like an experience in of itself. Like, it wasn't a musical in a sense where, like, they weren't having, like, normal conversation in a sing-songy way.
Yeah.
But, the musical numbers were just, they were, like, vital to the actual film. And Manchester Orchestra, at least some of the members of the band, were responsible for the soundtrack. And it was just astonishing. It really was great. And the movie was great. It's just, the whole time, it's just, the topics it dealt with and everything, it was just put a warm smile on my face.
Yeah.
Funny thing, though, our one friend, Barn, when describing that movie, was like, hey, yeah, that movie with Elijah Wood that came out. And, if you don't know, there's, like, this huge joke on, especially Reddit, that Daniel Radcliffe and Elijah Wood are, like, the same. They look identical. And so the fact that someone legitimately made that mistake cracked me up.
Yeah.
But, it was Daniel Radcliffe, Paul Dano.
Good old Harry Potter.
He's a wizard. Yeah. But yeah, that's
also
it.
what we're known for.
That's my number 1. And then you saw...
I saw, beyond what Gino saw, there's 2 other movies that I saw this year.
And I did see one of them.
You did see one of them?
It just unfortunately didn't make my list. I liked it, but it didn't make my list.
Captain America Civil War. It's, honestly... Great movie. I loved it. I don't read the comics. I don't read the original the DC comics. Just kidding. I know it's Marvel.
Okay.
I'm just trying to trigger Gino over here.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, but I don't read the original comics. I actually didn't even see the second Avengers. Still haven't seen the second Avengers because I'm a slut.
Probably okay.
But so I was a little lost when I was watching it at some points because I know that it takes place after the 2nd Avengers. They apparently like terrorized an entire country, and that's kind of what causes a lot of the plot. But I actually really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a ton of fun. Saw it with Gino, and Gino, being the comic fanboy that he is, the comic fangirl that he is, was fangirling the entire movie. Every time something appears on the screen, it's like I know when Spider-Man appeared, he's just like, oh my god,
yeah,
Spider-Man is so good. But I had a lot of fun with that movie. It's like, even though I was kind of lost at points, at least I had Gino to fill those points in. But it was very fun. I loved the comedy that took place in it. I thought the comedy relief was on point. It was perfect. I thought Spider-Man was really good, and I look forward to his movie now after it. And the fact that Robert Downey Jr. will be in it ought to be interesting, just to see how Iron Man plays.
Oh yeah, and Homecoming, definitely. Yeah, I think one thing, probably my biggest issue with Avengers 2 was that the humor fell completely flat for me. It was, it was kind of like they were trying to make every character as quippy as Iron Man, and it just didn't work. And it was really, and they would have it at like these wildly inappropriate times. Like, you would think that these people are trying to grasp the severity of the situation, and then here's War Machine with like a goofy little, jab or something, and it just like, for me, it just didn't really work. And there's, quite a few other issues with this second Avengers movie, and that was one of the things when I first saw the original Avengers, a lot of those jokes hit, but on, progressive viewings, it's kind of like, oh, okay, like, I know this, it's not as funny. And for Avengers 2, it was, like, not as funny, like, the first time. And so Avengers 3, or it's basically Avengers 3, Captain America, does a lot better with that. Like, the interactions between, like, Winter Soldier and Falcon are very subtle, but funny. Like you said, Spider-Man, hilarious. I liked the concept of the movie, this angered man who lost his family because of, the antics of the Avengers, him trying to get revenge. I do think it worked pretty well. My only, and it's not really a complaint, but Baron Zemo is like a big villain, like a big Captain America villain.
Yeah.
And they just kind of used his name for that character. And I don't really know if it was just like a little thing for comic fans, but for me it was pretty much like, I don't want to say a waste, but I don't know. They could have used literally anyone else, and I don't think it would have been less effective. I think just having him be Zemo was just kind of like for comic fans. But at the end of the day, it was like, you should have just made his name like Jim or something. But I still really like the movie.
Oh yeah, it was a great movie. Well, and moving on from that, the other movie, my favorite movie of the year, even though I only saw like 3 or 4 movies this year, was Arrival, which Gino actually hasn't seen yet.
No, I hate myself.
He needs to see it because it was a fantastic movie, and I'm not going to be able to spoil it because I don't want to spoil it for Gino right here. But it's I went into that movie expecting Contact, which is one of my favorite movies. I love that movie. You've seen Contact, right, Gino? No. Well, yeah, Contact's a great movie. It's sort of about aliens as well. I mean, it actually spends basically 98% of the movie just this woman who hears these contacts from outer space and tries to build a machine to visit them to see what's up, what's going on. And going into Arrival, that's kind of the impression I had going into it, but it ended up being slightly different than that. And it was just fantastic the way it was done. The soundtrack was incredible. It manages to be like, it just, I don't know what it does, but there's a part in the movie where, because the whole idea of Arrival is that these like alien pods or spaceships arrive all over the planet Earth, which you know this, I'm assuming, Gino. and they have to like figure out why they're there because these guys just like showed up out of nowhere and they're just sitting there. And there's just this part where they're checking it out, and the way the music plays just makes it like just perfectly creepy, just like very unsettling. Like I just had like goosebumps watching it. I'm like, this isn't a horror movie or anything, but like I'm just like, what is happening? Like I just felt very on edge, very uneasy, and it was done perfectly. The story was incredible. The way that it was done was amazing. When you get to like the big reveal of the movie, you're just like, you basically shit yourself. Just like you're, and the thing is, and I'll say this, it is kind of an intellectual movie. Like people who aren't yeah, I have an IQ of 180 and only I can understand what's happening. But it definitely, you have to be following the movie for the entirety of the way it plays out to really understand what happens. My dad actually was very confused, and even after trying to explain it to him, he couldn't quite grasp what had happened. But it can be confusing if you don't pay attention for most of it. But it was so good, just the way that it was done, the way that it makes you feel. I mean, it was something else. It truly was, and I was really glad that I saw it, and hopefully Gino sees it.
I hope. I actually was going to see it last week because it was still in theaters. The one Regal back at home has like a ton of screens, so they keep movies for a while. And I just didn't get around to it. But I'll definitely pick it up on Blu-ray when it comes out. So yeah, I'll see it.
It'll be you'll really enjoy it probably. Although Gino's not quite as intellectual as I am.
I'm a big dummy.
Yeah, he's just a baby boy. But
so I think we're ready to move on to floor 4.
Floor 4? 3? That was floor 3, Gino.
No,
we switched technology in movies.
Yeah, tech was floor 2. Movies is floor 3. Now we're going to floor 4.
Okay.
Well, the first floor was the lobby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ground floor.
The ground
in
floor.
America, or maybe that I forgot how that works. It's like America does something weird with the way.
Well, I have a feeling we don't have any foreign viewers.
It doesn't matter. Let's just move on to the next floor. Yes.
Television.
Yeah.
So Mac for this is mostly going to talk about anime that came out this past year, while I'm going to talk about mostly normal television shows that came out.
Yeah.
On TV. So, who do you want to start this?
I can start. That's fine. I'll just talk about my list.
Talk about your list.
Okay, so I'm a filthy weeaboo. I like anime. I watch a lot of anime. So I'll talk about anime. If you don't like anime, then skip this part.
I believe you also, if I'm not mistaken, have a top 5. And
yeah, actually, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with my biggest disappointment. And then I'm going to move on to my top 5. Then I'm going to talk about some honorable mentions that I feel need to be mentioned just for the sake of mentioning them. So my biggest disappointment, anime-wise, this year was a little show called Izetta the Last Witch, which obviously you probably have no idea what this is about, Gino. It's
well, it's not about the first witch.
Well, when I tell you it's not Blair Witch, I can tell you that much. But when I tell you the synopsis, you might actually be interested, but it takes place in a parallel universe, like a separate universe, Nazi Germany. It's World War II. You've got all these countries on edge fighting each other, and there's this one little country that is plotted, next to Germany. It's just a little poor little teeny weeny country that just doesn't have much going for it, but they just happen to be in the way in between like Germany and its offensive. They just have to be that one country that's the stepping stone, and it's a fake country. It doesn't actually exist in real life, but they happen to have a lost technology that other countries don't have, a witch, someone who can fly around on, not a broomstick actually, she flies around on guns. She flies around on these rifles, like big World War II rifles, and she's super overpowered. Like, let me just say that. She can literally destroy enemy tanks, she can destroy an entire enemy front line, thousands of soldiers instantly, and essentially the plot of it is that they're going to use this witch to try to stop Germany, try to prevent them from doing what they're trying to do, and essentially saved the world during World War II. And like I thought this was really cool. Going into this anime, I was like, this actually sounds like a really fun anime. It's gonna be a good time. I'm gonna have a lot of fun. And then it just fell flat for most of it. It was good. Like, don't get me wrong, I still actually enjoyed it overall for the most part, but it's just disappointing is the only way I can describe it, because the plot was just kind of bad with the writing. The way that they wrote it, they did bad things. The witch herself has a secret, which is the fact that she can't use magic in certain places. There's like these magic lines underneath the earth that like she can only use magic in those parts of the planet, and only this country knows about that. And for whatever reason, two high-ranking generals in their army decide to talk about it out in the open, and someone overhears them. And so, of course, Nazi Germany finds out, and then, oh, now we know her weakness, so we're going to lure her into bad things. And it's like, this doesn't happen. Like, you're not going to have two high-ranking generals do that. So it just, and then it pulls out another witch somewhere along the lines. They, for whatever reason, Nazi Germany had cloning technology, so they cloned another witch, and then they started fighting. And I'm just like, why is this happening? It doesn't make any sense. So it was dumb in the end. That's all I can say. Like, it's just, as fun of a show as it was, it also pandered. The main characters were kind of lesbians, so it was it pandered to that audience a lot. And I know people weren't okay with that. I was perfectly fine with that, but some people might not be. But moving on to my top 5 anime for this past year, I'll start with number 5, which was a show that Gino actually did watch.
I did, yes.
It was Erased, which was a good show. Like, it was a great show. It was fantastic. And then we're going to have some spoilers for Erased here in case anyone hasn't watched it. But it every week I was captivated by this show. I'd get to the end of the episode and I'd be like, goddamn, can I get another episode like right now? I don't want to have to wait a week, because it was just incredible. And I think that like you can agree that it was really good. Like, you wanted to know what was going to happen next. Like the whole time you're just like, this kid, he goes back in time, knows what he's doing, and it's just like, who's the culprit? Which actually the culprit ended up being kind of obvious in the end.
It was one of those things too where they definitely like, they put it in your face, like constantly having him like shaded in the dark and all this stuff, but like it almost seemed too obvious, and so it was like, oh, it's probably not him.
Yeah, it's and that's sort of how I felt about it. I honestly, it was a great show. It fell flat in the end. It was kind of weak when it got to the end. It's like, well, the guy who we thought was the culprit actually is the culprit, and then he goes into what, like a 10-year coma.
That was and I think a lot of the reason why it fell flat is because I know people always kind of use this as just like a generic excuse, but the pacing. I feel like there was a pretty solid pacing going from like the first, I don't know, 80% of the episodes, and then all of a sudden, like you said, it's just like this huge plunge forward, and everything just kind of happens right away. And it just like, whoop, okay, we're done. Like, it definitely felt like a show that would have benefited from like a few more episodes, maybe, just to kind of lengthen out, like maybe just delve a little bit deeper into his background. I think Joe was telling me that the book actually explains a lot more about like the killer's motives and his background and stuff, which they didn't really flesh out at all in the show. So I'm with you there. It's just like there was all this build up and then like 0 to 100, but not in like a good way.
Yeah, not really at all. But I mean, in my opinion, didn't ruin the show.
No,
there were so many people that just decided to bash this show after the ending. Like, you know, oh my god, it was the worst show I've ever seen. It's like, no, it wasn't the worst show you've ever seen. Like, you sat there week by week, just like we did, captivated by it, excited for the next episodes. And like, because of that, it deserves this number 5 slot, because I really enjoyed that show in the end. It had a great opening and ending as well, and the soundtrack was quite good. The animation was good. I know that you actually, one interesting piece was you did not like the mom's lips.
No, because everyone else had like normal non-existent lips, and then for some unknown reason the mom just had these gigantic collagen infused just mouth chomper things, and it was I don't know.
She had some dick sucking lips.
Yeah, I just don't know why they did that. It's just it's not. I mean, it sounds like a really silly complaint, but it's like when all of your other characters have like a certain design to them, and then like you just give one gigantic lips. It was just, I don't know. It was weird, but
yeah. And then the other big draw I've heard is that the kids themselves, all of them acted way too mature for their age.
Because the one kid, I mean, obviously the main character makes sense because he's really an adult in a kid's body. So, like, he's going to act more mature. And, like, the one girl, I think one of the reasons was because she was abused and you just don't really act as kiddish because of that. But all the other friends and stuff, I see what you mean.
Yeah, it was a little weird with that in that front. But, and I guess some people probably weren't okay with the pedophilic nature of the fact that, like, this guy's, like, almost 30 in a young body and he's getting really close to this one girl, but...
Yeah, but I mean, that's like a silly complaint because, like, he is a kid.
He is a kid.
Yeah.
Or is he a squid?
It's true. So, we'll never know.
All right. Well, moving on to my number 4 was Flying Witch. This show is a slice of life show, which, you know, if you don't know that genre, it's literally just like there's no real sci-fi well, okay, that's wrong to say. There actually is, because it's about a witch and her stuff, but aside from that, there's really no sci-fi.
No, I know
or
what you
fantasy
mean,
elements. It's just like normal everyday life. It's a slice of life, and it was really just a very relaxing show. Like, the best way I could describe this show is it's just like therapy. The anime, you just sit, and if you ever had a bad day or anything, you watch this show and it's fun. It's happy. It's about just this one witch who moves in with this family that isn't witches, and it's just got very relaxing elements to it. It had a nice, simple, relaxing soundtrack. It was animated by JC Staff, which is one of my favorite studios because they've pretty much always animate something well. They have very few badly animated shows. They've really not done anything horribly. You can almost say they're like perfect to be an average. They're you pretty much always can guarantee that a show that they release is going to be watchable for the most part. And sometimes they get something that's amazing, like my favorite anime of all time, Toradora. So they're one of my favorite studios for that reason, and that's why. And Flying Witch makes it up there because I love shows like Flying Witch, similar to like No No Biori or something like that. Moving on to number 3, going on to the comedy genre, is Konosuba. It was a hilarious show, like stupid funny. It's I feel like Gino really actually should watch this show because there's a good chance he'd like it. It's a fantasy genre. There's this NEET, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, not an education, employment, or training. So it's just someone who is just a bum, lives at home, doesn't have a job, doesn't go to school or whatever, just plays video games all day. I'm not describing myself, Gino. Not. But he's basically useless, and then he just randomly gets teleported to this fantasy world where, like, there's dragons, and it's like just think of it like an RPG MMO kind of thing. And just oh no, wait, actually I'm thinking of a different show. This one's the one where he dies. He dies in the real world, and he gets the chance to go into a fantasy world, and it's just a ton of fun. It basically takes the normal fantasy genre that you have, and it just kind of flips it on its head and just pokes fun at it. It just does nothing but have fun, and that's why I really liked it, because I'm a great fan of the comedy genre itself. Moving on to number 2 was a show called Real Life, which is kind of like 17 again, the anime, which I never actually saw that movie, but there's this guy who's kind of a good for nothing who gets a chance to swallow a pill and go back to his high school days. It basically turns his body into that of like a 17-year-old, and he can relive high school, he can make new friends, he can have another shot at life. And the guy who gives him the pill is doing it under the guise of, well, this is an experiment, we just want to test this out and see how this works before we can put it out to the real world. And the cool thing is that it actually really touches on human relationships a lot. It touches on just how people act at that age, how people are in high school, and it does it really, really well. It manages to he makes friends with this one girl who doesn't necessarily have any friends. he reaches out to her and helps her. She just kind of isn't living life the way that she wants to live it, and helps her out. And I just really like this show because it manages to touch on friendship and why human nature is just so important back in the days of high school and all that jazz. And then finally, my number one favorite anime of the year was Re:Zero, which was the anime I was actually describing earlier on accident. This is the one where the guy gets transported to a fantasy world out of nowhere, and this show was incredible. It's kind of like Konosuba and Erased combined, actually. This guy gets transported to another world. It's a fantasy world. He has to just... There's not really anything he has to do. He just has to live and go by his life normally. But he runs into this girl, and she helps him out a little bit. He's about to get like murdered by some street thugs. And she helps him out. She saves his life, so he feels indebted to her. He ends up actually falling in love with her, and this is where all the memes come about for the entirety of the show, where he's so in love with this chick, and another girl comes along, Rem, who's best girl, ends up coming along, and it's just... no matter how much she likes him, he doesn't like her, and everyone gets pissed off about that. Whatever. But the whole idea behind Re:Zero is every time he dies, he returns to a previous point, like a save point in that life. So it's almost like Dark Souls, the anime, where he has to overcome something, like, because there's plenty of really terrifying people in this world who just like murder him. Like, I know in the first arc, he just gets like literally just gets his gut like ripped open. It's very gruesome. Like, this guy, the main character's name is Subaru, and they call him like Sufferu, like, because he just suffers the entire anime, because he literally, there's multiple times where he'll just get like tortured to death or impaled, or just like his guts ripped out of his body or whatever, and it's pretty gruesome. And then he goes back to the previous save point with all the memories intact, and has to try and live things differently to overcome this time, and he just slowly goes crazy over the course of the anime, and they do a great job of it. It's there's one episode which the way that it ends reminds me of a Tarantino movie. Just like it's literally he gets his head sliced off in the snow and just falls to the ground, and then the credits start rolling and the screen just like goes to red or something, and it's just like, that's something that anime doesn't do, since you're not really familiar with the genre, Gino. And it was incredible, and the way the show did everything it did was amazing. It had an amazing soundtrack. It was terrifying at points. It was animated very well. White Fox did a great job, the studio that made it. And there is no season 2 announcement, but holding out for it, hoping that it happens. Joe and I know, are really excited for it. Joe being another good friend of mine who's a weeaboo. So, but there's that. That's my top 5 anime. I have a few honorable mentions that I just need to put out there. There was a show called Kisniver, which was done by Trigger, who did fun things like Kill la Kill, and that was a fun show. There was a show called Keijo, with 8 exclamation points, which was about girls who have to use their butts to knock each other off platforms in a swimming pool. It sounds dumb, but it actually ended up being a really fun show. There's a show called Flip Flappers, which was about... honestly, it's hard to describe what it was about because it was just mysterious and weird. But it was really good. It's haven't watched the last episode yet. It just recently came out, but it was animated very well, had a great art style, and a very enticing story. And then there was another one, My Hero Academia, which Gino actually has started reading the manga for that, and he's super into it.
It's really good.
And season 1 of that aired this year, and that was... honestly, I almost put that in my top 5 list. I'd almost say that was probably number 6, because that was a show that when I first started watching it, I actually wasn't all that into it, and then as I kept watching, I was like, this is actually really good. It's I always liked the underdog story where the character...
I know, the main character, he's just so cool.
He's just so... it's always fun when you've got someone who's weak and just dull and then moves on to...
Yeah, but he's really got the goodness in his heart. Which sounds really, like, lame, but you can tell, like, his intentions are, like, really strong. And the first season ends with the big villain battle.
If I remember correctly, it ends while they're they're at that like training camp kind of thing.
Yeah,
and all
and then
the
they have-
villains attack, and it ends after they resolve that.
Yeah.
So
So I've read past that. It's cool, and all the students have like really kind of unique personalities, and the superpowers are not like overly conventional. The quirks, I should say. So it makes it kind of interesting. At first I thought it was going to be like a very, no, I don't want to say generic, but kind of like these, your average, superhero abilities. And they didn't really do that, and so, no, I haven't seen the anime, but if it's pretty on par, I would say that I'd probably enjoy it.
oh yeah, it's really fun anime. The animation's great. The voice acting was great. Whenever like Detroit Punch was a fun one. But yeah, it's I like that the author is really into Western comics. He definitely draws from some of those. But honestly, that's about all I have to say about anime. So are you gonna take it over to the normie television?
Yeah, the
Gino?
normie. It's like probably there's like what 3 shows that aren't on Netflix. Oh, I guess that's not that bad. All right, so starting off, my biggest disappointment, and again, kind of like with Mac, is not that I didn't like the show. I did enjoy the show. It's just I had much higher expectations, and that would be Luke Cage. This is one of Netflix's Marvel shows. They have Daredevil and Jessica Jones, and in the future they'll have Iron Fist and Punisher. And Luke Cage, so Luke Cage was the next one, kind of following up. He was a character introduced in the Jessica Jones TV show, and there was just a lot of hype leading up to it, and it just, I feel like I've said fell flat like a million times, but like it just kind of fell flat. I mean, the character himself was great. The guy playing Luke Cage was really interesting. I really liked the villain. But then they end up changing the villains like halfway through the show. And the second villain is not nearly as interesting or as well done. And so it just kind of has all this build up, and then it's cut and then it just like is lost. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was kind of like, meh. And another, one of my biggest complaints, honestly, so like I said, Luke Cage was like this huge vital part in the Jessica Jones TV show that came out last year. She never makes an appearance in the Luke Cage show. And I was like, it just seemed odd to me. I don't know. But yeah, so it was, for what I was expecting, it was pretty disappointing. Not a bad show. If you were someone that hadn't seen Daredevil and hadn't seen Jessica Jones and wasn't really aware of like what the Marvel Netflix shows were capable of being, probably would have gotten a lot out of it. But for me, I was just kind of like, eh. So, moving on. My honorable mention is going to go to FX's Atlanta. It's Donald Glover's new show, also known as Childish Gambino. He's on Community. Another show, I don't want to say, it certainly wasn't disappointing. It was really good. It just, I didn't get as much out of it maybe as a lot of other people did. It's kind of, you know how you're talking about slice of life shows? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that, but it's also kind of weird. It's supposed to be like what it's like growing up as, not growing up, but like, living in Atlanta. It has a lot to do with black culture, stuff like that. And a lot of the episodes, like, while themselves are interesting, they don't really tie in very well. And not that a show needs to do that. Like, it's okay to have each episode kind of being its own thing. But they definitely do have an overarching story, an overarching plot that they introduce and they kind of go with for a little bit, and then they just kind of like drop, and then they kind of bring it back. And so by the time the season actually ends, that the major plot, which was like his cousin getting a record label, becoming a famous rapper, it didn't really feel like it really went anywhere. It only kind of progressed like a little bit. And so what I thought they were setting up for the show is not really what they did. It doesn't mean some of the episodes weren't some of my favorite things I've seen this year. It's just, as a whole, for me, was great, but not super great. So, moving on to my top 5. Coming in at number 5 is the 3rd season of Silicon Valley on HBO. I've been watching that with my dad since season 2 came out, and it's a really, really funny show about technology. I'm sure you would really enjoy it, Mac.
I've actually been meaning to watch it. I've heard a lot about it.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious. Season 3 for me, not quite as good as the first 2, and it kind of had its very similar in nature with the earlier seasons, in a sense where anytime something goes well for them, you know it's going to end up not working out. And it gets a little predictable. Like, anytime like something exciting happens for the characters on the show, it's like, oh, well, this can't work out because, you know, like, something has to hold them back. Something has to fail. And sometimes, like, the way it happens is really funny, and so it's fine. But it got to a point where it was a little predictable. But for the most part, I still really enjoyed it. Not quite as much as season 2 or season 1. That's why it's so low on my list. But it was still funny. I'm looking forward to season 4. Next is American Horror Story Roanoke. Kind of surprising. So American Horror Story is something that has kind of progressively gotten worse and worse past, you know, everyone has their favorite seasons. I would say it's gotten worse past season 2, but a lot of people don't even really like season 2. It's, you know, if you're not familiar, it's an anthology series. So each season is its own entity.
I actually watched one of the seasons, the one with the circus.
So that would be season 4. That's Freak Show. Yeah, and American Horror Story has an issue where it always bites off more it can chew. You know, because these seasons, you know, have a single storyline that they're going at in a certain time period and everything, is they know that there's only certain things they can do with certain stories. So then they kind of try and incorporate that with the season. And all of a sudden they add all these little tiny plot lines, and it's just too much, and they can't follow through with any of it. And by the end of the season, everything just falls apart. And so with this newest one, they really kind of stayed true to that. Or wait, I don't want to say that. They stayed true to the story. They didn't stay true to that past fashion. So instead of introducing all of these extra little details and stuff, they kind of just kept it pretty well contained. And so the first half of the season is like this. It's supposed to be like a dramatic reenactment of this couple that live in a house that's haunted, essentially, by these old Puritans. You know, it's Roanoke. So if you are familiar with like the lost colony of Roanoke, you know, it was just these people that disappeared. And I think Croatoan was written or carved into one of the trees. No one ever knew what happened. So it's like, had to do with that. And then the second half of the season was this like found footage where they had the actors of the dramatic reenactment and then the real life people all staying in the house. And then like actual creepy stuff starts happening. And it all really worked well together. And then, of course, they just don't know how to end stuff. And the last episode, it was like they, you know, when it comes to horror, you don't need to explain everything. Sometimes it's okay to let things just be open-ended. But they just would not let that happen with American Horror Story. And they kept pushing and pushing. And so the newest, the end last episode didn't really do much for me. But overall, I thought it was a nice return to form, and I enjoyed it. Coming in at number 3, Daredevil Season 2. Which, surprising is it's not higher. I really enjoyed it. It was something where it felt like there was, again, kind of two stories within the season. The first half of the season was kind of mostly focusing on the Punisher, and then the second half was mostly focusing on the Hand and Elektra and stuff. The Punisher was still involved, but it was kind of felt like there were two stories, and so if it would have just been kind of like one solid flowing thing, maybe it would have worked out more. But on the other hand, when I look at shows like Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, when it's kind of just a single storyline, they do start to drag its feet a little bit. So maybe that was season 2 trying to not drag its feet as much, but still also trying to fill out a full 13 episode season. But, The Punisher was absolutely great. I thought his addition was really well done. I'm blanking on the name of the actor. He was in The Walking Dead.
Tom Cruise.
I think it was Tom Cruise. Yeah, but anyway, he did like a phenomenal job as the Punisher, and that's why they're picking him up for, his own show. I think there's this one confrontation between him and Daredevil, and if you're not familiar with the background of the Punisher, his family was murdered in front of him, and that's why he's avenging their deaths, killing people that deserve to be killed. And there's this one scene, I think it's episode 4, where I think he's like beat to hell, and he's in a cemetery, and he's talking to Daredevil, and he's telling him about what had happened. And it was so emotional and so sincere, and it was so well done and acted and everything. It was probably one of my favorite TV moments from 2016. I really liked that. Overall, very strong follow-up to season 1. Coming in at number 2, BoJack Horseman season 3. I don't know if you're familiar at all with this show.
I am.
It's season 3 really notches up the depression of the show. Pretty much it's a cartoon about depression. All the characters on there are not very happy with their lives and are struggling with things, and I think season 3 just really cranks that up to 10, and it just gets so, I don't want to say real, but it just gets so kind of like deep at times. I don't know, it just really, it stuck with me a lot more than the first 2 seasons. Like, a lot of it was like, whoa, and it just kind of was like at one of his friends from his childhood TV show, she's like this crazed drug addict, and one of the episodes are like hanging out doing all these things, and all of a sudden she's like talking about like the future life she wants to live, how she wants to get better and do all this stuff, and they're at like this conservatory and talking, and it just kind of, BoJack says her name and she doesn't respond, and he says her name and says her name, and no response, and the episode ends, and of course she dies.
Oh, wow.
And it's just like, oh my god, like it was, things like that really, I don't know, made the season like very memorable, and I really liked it. And of course, number 1, being as basic as I can be,
Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad. Stranger Things. I know Stranger Things was all the craze this year, but honestly, it was for a good reason. It was just so well done. It felt like an old school 80s like horror film. I mean, they had probably some of my favorite parts is they had movie posters in the house, and there was like The Thing and Evil Dead, which are some of my favorite old school horror movies. But it was just so well done, especially because it's so hard to find, I feel like, child actors who are like completely believable, and every single one hit all the notes perfectly. The show was just insanely well casted. It had a really interesting story it was trying to tell, and it left a lot of things open-ended too, to where, there's things that can be answered in the following season. I am nervous that they're going to bite off a little bit more that they can chew. I don't think anyone really expected Stranger Things to be as big of a hit as it was. So hopefully they can, keep their heads on straight and not get a little too in over their heads. Yeah. But yeah, those were my favorite TV shows of the year.
Okay.
So I think we can move on.
Ready to move on to the next floor. The what is this, floor 5 now, or is it floor 4?
5.
5. Okay. Well, this floor, probably our favorite floor, probably is going to be our favorite floor for a while. The video games floor. So, what do you have to say, Gino?
Oh, man. Well, all right. I am going to switch up what I have written down. So, for biggest disappointment, I'm going to actually go with Unravel. I didn't actually end up finishing it. It was a game. I don't know if you regularly watch E3. I want to say last year at the EA conference, this guy walks out on stage, and you can just tell he is so nervous. He's shaking as he's talking, and he's talking about this game he's been working on, and he pulls out this little character out of his coat. And it's the main character of Unravel, Yarny, which is this little guy made out of yarn. And he is, you can see him holding it and shaking, and you could just tell, like, this guy is passionate about his game. And so I was like, I'm going to buy it. And I did. And it wasn't bad. It just wasn't particularly great. It's a puzzle platformer. Where you solve puzzles mostly by swinging and pushing items and attaching your string to other items and stuff like that. And it's okay. It's a pretty game visually, but there isn't much narrative at all. Again, I haven't actually finished the game, so maybe it's not fair for me to be talking about it, but it was just something where I felt I was expecting a little bit more out of it, but it was one of those things. I bought it purely based on the guy's presentation, not really based on the game at all. So I don't really know what I was expecting.
You just wanted to support the poor guy.
Honestly, that was it.
So what did you switch that with? You said you had another disappointment.
And I switched it mainly because I don't want to say it was a disappointment, because I did like it, and so I'm probably going to put it under my honorable mentions, and that's Inside. And again, it wasn't a disappointment. It was just very, very, very hyped. And I played it. I actually played it 2 nights ago on one sitting. I beat the game, and it's good. It's really good. It's a puzzle platformer, again, side-scrolling, and by Playdead, who developed Limbo. I played Limbo back when it came out. I never did get around to finishing it, and that was mainly one of the reasons why I liked Inside more than Limbo. Is the puzzles, while I felt like there was enough challenge in them to make it satisfying to complete them, none of them were like difficult to complete, like physically. That was my biggest problem with Limbo, wasn't that I couldn't solve the puzzles, like I couldn't complete the puzzles. Like there was one puzzle that it was like I knew what I needed to do, but I could not control the character in a sense to like solve it.
Something like Super Meat Boy or
kind of, yeah. It was just like that was what was frustrating about it. So I never got around to finishing it.
So you were upset with it just because you weren't good enough.
Yeah, I was upset with it because I was bad at the game. But I thought Inside, I thought it did a better job with that. I thought Inside, it had a very interesting world. It had like a somewhat interesting narrative, but it doesn't really. It leaves a lot of things very open. You get to a part in the game, and it's like, oh, what's this? And then the game kind of changes a little bit, and then you finish it, and you're not really you don't really ever know like what exactly happened. You play as this little boy. It's never very clear like what he's doing. If he's really just like, if he just ends up in this location, or if he was trying to get there this whole time. So I just feel like there was a strong lack of clarity. But I still enjoyed the game. It's very a very pretty game visually. And there were certain points, like there was one point where the puzzle had to do with like sound. So like there were these big like sound waves that would literally like eviscerate you if you weren't like behind cover. And like as you further progressed along down this like sequence, the music would change and it would like it like would kind of ramp up and kind of like drown out the shock waves. And it just like really flowed really well and kind of was neat, and nothing ever kind of repeated that. Like that was like this really cool, powerful moment, and nothing else really lived up to that again, which was too bad. But I really liked that. So yeah, but I don't want to say that was a disappointment because I really liked it, so I'll put it under my honorable mentions.
Okay.
My other honorable mention is Kirby Planet Robobot.
You've played a Kirby game before?
I have.
Wow.
I've played a few. Yeah, Kirby Planet Robobot was, I like all the Kirby games. They're always very simple. They're not very, it doesn't take much to figure out how to play it. But Planet Robobot had like a nice little twist with the robot that, Kirby could get in the suit and suck up abilities, and then the robots would change, which was fun and interesting and stuff. And the levels were a little bit more challenging than I think than like Triple Deluxe was, which was the other 3DS game. I had a lot of fun with it. So, another honorable mention.
Okay.
Okay, then I will go through my top 5. Well, why don't you go through your honorable mentions? Do you have any honorable mentions?
Well, you see,
or your disappointment?
I played exactly 4 games this year, like big games, and so I don't really have a top 5. I don't really have an honorable mentions. I don't really have a biggest disappointment either, because for the most part everything was fun. One thing that I think that we should touch on is Pokemon Go. Because like even though it's not a traditional video game, it still is a game that captivated all of us for like a month or so. Just kept us going.
You definitely you and the guys up here got into it a lot more than I did. Back at home, I was back home for the summer, but it definitely took the world by storm.
Oh yeah,
for a good few weeks, and I think, I think everyone likes to focus on what Pokemon Go did wrong.
Yeah.
Like they messed up the tracking and then they got rid of it and there was no way to figure out where Pokemon were relative to you and all that. That was like the biggest one. And but I think Pokemon Go also like got a lot of people back into the games that, haven't been into Pokemon in a while, and it was just something that, like, I don't know, you could do with your friends. Go outside. I mean, we went on campus, and literally every single person on campus was playing Pokemon Go.
Oh yeah, it honestly was crazy how big Pokemon Go was at first. I remember the first time that I actually went out with friends, like to a nearby park to play it. We ran into a group of kids that were playing it, and I mean, this was like a day or two after it had released, and it's just like it was crazy how quickly it got people playing it and how many people played it. I mean, at the zoo, which I worked at for the summer, was insane. How just how many people played it there. How the zoo had its own events for it and everything. I mean, it was honestly incredible. Of course, I was playing it as well and just trying to level up and get on up there, getting good. I actually had an unfair advantage because the zoo had like 50 or 60 Pokestops in it, so I managed to hit like a couple thousand Pokestops within like a week or two just because of my advantage. But I don't know. I mean, even though I don't play the game anymore and I stopped playing it after like a month, it was a big thing. It was crazy how popular it got. So I feel like that one just could not be mentioned for 2016.
No, and I think again, Niantic. I think Pokemon Go probably did have the possibility to. I don't want to say be bigger. I don't think they could have done anything initially to make it any bigger than it was. But I think, and they were obviously, people were going to drop off. It was just going to happen. But they didn't really do much to prevent that. Again, with the whole tracking thing. And, and kind of now they're just starting to introduce some of like the Generation 2 Pokemon, and Ditto and stuff like that. But, you wait until the winter, which you have a good proportion of people, especially in the States, who aren't going to be super willing to go out and play Pokemon Go. It was like, 13 degrees today?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to go out and play Pokemon Go. So I think that was something where they really should have released that stuff at the beginning of fall, when everyone was going back to school, when Pokemon Go was starting to wane, really get people back into it. But they really just kind of gave more people to back out.
Niantic was the big issue with Pokemon Go. They
unfortunately
they fixed things too late. They went a solid couple of weeks there without talking to us at all. Didn't address anything, not even a word for them. They updated their games with barely anything in the patch notes. I remember the biggest meme with Pokemon Go was when there was a patch, they would say minor text fixes, and that's it. That's all the patch would say. But a bunch of other things changed as well. But all it says is minor text fixes. So it's Niantic really screwed that one in the balls. They really messed up, and maybe I'd still be playing it. Probably not though.
No, and that's the thing with mobile games is people are going to drop off.
Yeah,
you're never going to retain that certain surge of popularity, but they could have done more, and they didn't. But hey, they were the craze for a while, and Pokemon Sun and Moon were more successful than they probably would have been otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I guess with that, I'll move on to what games I did play. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but one game I played was Call of Duty Infinite Warfare / COD 4 Remastered. I don't know if I really regret buying this, but I actually didn't end up playing Infinite Warfare. All I played was the new Zombies mode. I literally just got it for COD 4 Remastered. And as much as I hate the scummy business practice of the only way to get COD 4 Remastered is by buying COD Infinite Warfare, even if it is a good deal, I think it met expectations. I think the remastered version ended up being good for the most part. There was nothing wrong with it. It was COD 4 as we knew it. But the issue is the PC servers were dead within a week. There was nobody playing it anymore, and there's still nobody playing it. So I had a good fun for a solid 10 hours, and now I can't play it anymore even if I want to. But I don't know. They really should release a separate COD 4 Remastered.
And I think they will. It was one of those things where it was either they released Modern Warfare Remastered with Infinite Warfare, or they wait X amount of months after release and just released it standalone. They were never going to... It wouldn't have made sense for them to release it standalone the same day as another Call of Duty, because they're just going to compete with themselves. It would have been just silly. So I think what they were thinking was, hey, we'll release this for $20 more, which, honestly, for a modern day remaster is pretty good, since most are $40 or even more. I think they were like, hey, this will help drive up sales of Infinite Warfare, and, people can get Modern Warfare Remastered for a pretty good deal. But they were actually met with a lot of malice. I think people were really, really not okay with that decision. I wasn't too upset because I was planning on getting Infinite Warfare anyway. And so for me, it was like, oh, hey, this is a no-brainer. I didn't really play it all that much, though. I'm like you. I did play some of the campaign of Infinite Warfare, and it's actually really good for a Call of Duty campaign. They changed a lot of it, which has gone completely under the radar because no one bothered talking about it. I played the multiplayer a little bit, but I just didn't like it as much as Black Ops 3. I don't really know why. I just didn't get into it as much. And then I enjoyed COD 4 Remastered, but again, only played it just a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think if anything, all that game really did it met expectations, because you don't really get hype about Call of Duty games anymore. No. That doesn't really exist anymore. So it met expectations. It did what we wanted, I suppose. Another game that I played was Sid Meier's Civilization 6, which is a beloved game. The Civilization series is a beloved series of mine. I've poured almost 200 hours into Civ 5. That's a game which I love to, just at random points of the year, sit down and waste a solid 50 hours over the course of like a week or two playing it. It's a great game. Everyone who's played that game knows it's the just one more turn game, just 5 more minutes. You do one more turn, then you find yourself doing 10 more turns, and then it's next thing you know you've played 8 hours straight. Like no other video game, as far as I'm concerned, has captivated me as much, made me sit down and play it for that long in one sitting every single time I play it. Like I can't sit down and play a Civ game without playing it for at least like 3 hours or more. It's insane. And so Civ 6 came along, and it's like, well, what are they going to do? What are they going to change? Because Civ 5 honestly was kind of an almost perfect game with all of its DLCs. It's just, there was really nothing wrong with it for the most part. So what exactly can Civ 6 do to change that? And it actually, they did a pretty good job with it. Civ 6 has people were not too fond of the graphic style at first. It kind of looked like mobile games. But then when it actually released, it was a little different than what their concept images were. And honestly, I really like it. I like the new graphic style. It's really good. All of the Civilization leaders themselves, when they're in their animated cutscenes, look fantastic. They did a great job with the almost cartoony style of them. And I like it a lot. They changed a lot of how things work, and I like it. I like the district system, and I like the new civs. I like the new bonuses that civs have, and it's a fun game. It's a Civ game. The only issue is with it on release, there were a lot of exploits. There were a lot of ways to easily win. There were some Civs that were super overpowered. If you played as them, you were basically going to win. And so they fixed that, though. They've had 2 patches since. They've had a lot of balance patches, and it's a good game. I haven't actually played it since release, so I haven't played the new patches, but I know they're good. I know they've balanced it out pretty well. I think a lot of people are still attached to Civ 5, but the same thing happened when Civ 5 released. There's still people who think that Civ 4 is a better game than Civ 5. So pretty much whatever Civ game, as far as I'm concerned, whatever Civ game you start with is the one that you like the most and what you end up playing the most. So and it really doesn't matter. They're both great games. Civ 5 is a great game. Civ 6 is a great game. So as far as I'm concerned, it actually exceeded my expectations. It ended up being a decent game, and I'm looking forward to the DLC when it eventually releases. After that, there's Battlefield 1, which is a fantastic game, actually. It's, as we know, Battlefield decided to pull the World at War route. They decided to go all the way back to World War I, which, for all intents and purposes, was a very gruesome war. The mustard gas and all that just causing horrible deaths back then. And best thing about Battlefield 1 is the first time you load the game up, how it literally throws you into a campaign battle and just expects you to die. It just has you on the front lines of World War 1, and you just fight until you run out of bullets, and then you die, and it moves on to the next guy, and you die again. It just keeps doing that, and it ends up basically being just a anti-World War I campaign, an anti-war campaign altogether. Like, you can tell that DICE with Battlefield 1 was advocating strongly against wars and just violence in general, and they did a great job with it. The graphics are amazing. It looks beautiful. It's sort of like Star Wars Battlefront. I mean, that game was the best looking game of that year altogether. Like, you pretty much can't argue, and DICE does a great job with graphics, and they did a great job with Battlefield 1. And the multiplayer is amazing. The multiplayer is a ton of fun. There's not really much else to say about it. The soundtrack's amazing. It looks amazing. It's great fun to play. I feel like everyone should try it out. And then beyond that, my game of the year, my favorite game, probably my favorite game for a while as well, Overwatch, which I'm sure everyone knows that name by now. It's the Blizzard first-person shooter that was released, and it is a ton of fun. It's when they had an open beta weekend, and I'm pretty sure it was the largest beta in like the history of video game betas. There were millions of people that played it, and I had so much fun. I only got to play it for one day, just a couple hours of one day, and I was hooked like immediately. I'm like, I need this game. I bought it immediately. I had to wait 2 weeks for it to release, and I remember the subreddit for the game was just like in super withdrawal mode after that open beta. They just wanted the game so badly, and it's so much fun. Like, I have some friends that I always play it with. I've dropped like 200 hours into it already, and I plan to drop another 1,000 hours into it because it's just, I feel like it's never going to stop being fun. And the best part about Overwatch is the development team for the game itself. You have Jeff Kaplan, the game director himself. He's kind of a meme now. Some of his videos are pretty fun. He always releases the developer updates where he just talks to a camera for 10 minutes straight, but it's great. He does a great job with the game. He knows the player base really well. It's obvious that they follow the subreddit because a lot of the things that they add are things that were added from the subreddit. But we don't deserve these devs. Like, as players, considering how toxic the community can be at times, we honestly don't deserve how good they are to us. The game is just incredible because of them. They fix bugs within just like days of them beginning to appear. They have almost weekly patches, to be honest. Maybe every 2 weeks they have a patch. They've already added 2 new heroes since the game released. They've added 3 new maps. Every event that happens, like the Halloween event, they had the Summer Games event, and then this past holiday event, the Christmas event, were incredible. They were amazing. They did a great job with them. I look forward to so much more, and I honestly, like, I don't know how they keep doing it. Like, I don't know how this dev team even sleeps at night, because they're just like, it seems like they're constantly releasing great stuff for this game. And I don't know, I mean, it's probably going to be my favorite game of 2017 as well, just because who knows when I'll actually stop playing it. But I'll pass the baton back to Gino for his games, because I only play multiplayer games apparently.
Well, that's okay. I mean, Overwatch, I don't own it. I've played it a little bit. I'm familiar with it, and I'm not surprised that it's gotten, as many Game of the Year awards as it has, as much popularity as it's gained, because, the support behind it, the people in charge of it are just, it's like they get it. They understand what people want, and they understand, like, what makes a game good. And it's exciting. It was like a fresh breath of air, I think, in multiplayer shooters. I mean, like, yeah, it's similar to Team Fortress 2, but other than that, I mean, there hasn't been, like, kind of class-based shooters similar to it in a long time. So I think it was nice. But onto my stuff. So I do want to mention there was a lot of games last year that I actually didn't get around to playing that I really would have liked to have. Quantum Break, I would have liked to have played. Ratchet and Clank, I would have liked to have played. I've started Uncharted 4, but I haven't gotten around to finishing it. Titanfall 2 and Watch Dogs 2. Those are all games that I was like really excited for and just didn't get around to playing. That very well could have been on this list, but aren't. So, getting that out of the way, my number 5 is Gears of War 4. So I'm a pretty big fan of the Gears of War series. I've played through the first 3 a few times, at least 2 for each of the games. Was never too crazy about the story of Gears of War. Never thought it was really that easy to follow. But the gameplay was always really fun. And playing with a friend is always really fun. I've played all of those games co-op. And again, with Gears of War 4, same thing. Played through that game co-op. And it was a blast. I think that the campaign it was a lot different from the past games. It was a lot smaller scale, if that makes sense. So, like, the first 3 games, you are a member of the Coalition, and you're fighting this big war against the Locusts. And in Gears of War 4, you're kind of like these rogue, kind of outcast people that distance yourself from the army, and it's kind of like the whole game is one big rescue mission, really. So it's a lot, when you talk about like the grand scheme of things, it is a lot smaller scale. But it's a lot of fun. I like the characters. I didn't like any of them particularly more than any of the characters in the old Gears games. A lot of the characters from the old Gears games were in 4. which was nice because they were a lot more interesting than the new ones. Another thing I really liked about the Gears of War 4 campaign is they actually discovered colors. So the color palette was more than just like dark gray and black and like red, which was a nice change of pace. And they added a lot of weapons too, like a lot of new weapons and enemy types. They had these robot enemies in the first portion of the game that all had different guns, and they all were really unique and interesting. My favorite being, I think it was called the Overdrive, which was the shotgun that had 4 barrels. And it was, when you pressed the trigger, it would shoot 2 of them, and then when you released the trigger, it would fire off the next 2. So you could either go in like super rapid succession and shoot all of these shots, or you could like aim it at one area, shoot, and then aim it at another real quickly and let go. So it was kind of interesting. Fun weapon, fun game. I don't know if I would, it's not my favorite of the series. I'd still, again, kind of like when you were talking about Civilization, you always kind of have a soft spot for the first one you played, which for me was Gears 2, which for me I still feel like is my favorite. But still a fun game. Moving on, number 4, Fire Emblem Fates, which there's technically 3 different versions of the game, but I've played 1 and like 2/3 of another one. So I played all the way through Birthright, and I played a good portion of the way through Conquest, and I really enjoyed them. I think it was, return to fashion. Fire Emblem is a strategic RPG, and I think it was really well done. There was a lot of like new mechanics that they added with like the actual environments. Like you could change the layout of the battlefield, which in some maps didn't really do much, but in others like actually put a nice spin on the gameplay. I thought the story was interesting enough, unique between the 2 games, so it actually gives you kind of a reason to play both. Outside of the fact is, if you are a huge Fire Emblem fan, you're going to want to play both anyway because it's just that many more
or
levels.
Maybe you'll want to order a Japanese 3DS and play it before everyone else can play it.
Which, that is something that, certain people...
Nobody would do that though, right?
Well, it seems a little crazy, but you never know. But yeah, it was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. I know there was a lot of people that had complaints about it. Like they thought the story wasn't, that great. They felt like some of the balancing wasn't perfect, and it was one of those things where, like, yeah, could they have trimmed the fat, and in the sense where like gotten rid of maybe some of the chapters that weren't so strong? Had they taken all of the best levels across the 3 different games and put them into one Fire Emblem game, would we have had a superior game? Yeah, probably. I mean, they would have had to have tweaked the story a decent amount, but I don't know. For me, I thought it was a lot cooler just to get the large amount of levels and stuff to play. So I liked what they did with it, and that's why it's my number 4. Number 3, Pokemon Sun. This was a hugely anticipated game for me. Actually, one of the main reasons why I didn't get around to playing so many games this year is because I think it was in February, Nintendo released the Game Boy Pokemon games on the 3DS Virtual Console, and I played through Yellow, and I was like, yo, this is a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go pick up some other ones. And I ended up picking up Pokemon White and White 2 and Platinum and Heart Gold. And I played through all of those this year. And so it was just like a Pokemon-filled year. And that's when I got, to the end and was playing Pokemon Sun. And it was a ton of fun. It was the most different a Pokemon game has been. There was no more gyms, no more HMs. It was interesting. The story was really strong. I don't think my favorite story is still White, but I thought they did a really good job with the characters. I liked all the new Pokemon that they added. I thought they were all really well designed and fun, and lots of cool new abilities and stuff. but yeah, I mean, I feel like I could probably go on all day, and I do have some minor complaints too, like, at this point we have I think exactly 800 Pokemon, or around 800 Pokemon, but yet for some reason there's like still a million Raticates in the wild, like,
Yeah.
Because there's 4 distinct islands that you travel to in the game, and by the time you get to Island 4, like, I really don't need to be encountering Raticates. Like, that was one thing X and Y did really well, is every route had like different Pokemon, and I felt like Sun and Moon could have done a slightly better job. I don't know why they have such a strong aversion to making like the new Pokemon like really easy to find. Like, I don't know why they have to have it so, like, the encounter rates for, like, the Gen 7 Pokemon are lower than all of the other ones in the wild, which is a little frustrating. I really liked the Alolan forms, though, again, it was only Generation 1 Pokemon, Raticate being one of them. It would have been nice to see a little bit, like, they have all these other generations of Pokemon, but they constantly cater to the first one. We get it. We all liked Gen 1. We all were kids once and played it, but it's time to show a little love to everyone else. So, but still, overall, I think that was a great game. Going on to number 2, Firewatch. This was one of my most anticipated games. I had been following it for a little while. The guy that worked on the art design, Ollie Moss, he's a big name artist who's done a lot of prints through like Mondo and stuff. And I was just really looking forward to it. It seemed like it had a really neat story, and for me, I thought it was done really well. A lot of people were really disappointed in the ending. They felt like it didn't really have like a strong culmination, but for me, it was very fitting. I guess the ending was a little too normal, I guess. That was people's issue, that they kind of built up all this stuff and then it just turns out like, they keep alluding to there being like this big secret in the woods and all these people are watching you and all this stuff, and it just doesn't really end up being the case. And so people get a little bit disappointed at that. And then, you and the woman that you interact with in the whole game, people didn't really like how that relationship ended up being. But for me, it all worked really, really well. I won't go too much into detail or anything because, it's an entirely story-dependent game. But for me, it was probably one of my favorite narrative experiences, just in general, of games that I've played. And then moving on, number 1, Doom. So, I was very nervous. I picked up one of my favorite games of this generation, Wolfenstein: The New Order, came with the beta code for the multiplayer for the new Doom. And so when they finally released it, I was able to get on and play it, and it just wasn't that great. It just didn't really feel right, wasn't really that fun. It just made me so nervous. I was like, oh man, is the campaign going to be good? And a lot of people were like, yeah, it's different. And I was scared, but then it came out and it had all these great reviews. So I picked it up and it was just fun. I mean, the whole game is just about shooting and killing demons and just being visceral and using different weapons and breaking people apart. And that was the thing, like that. This is a game that literally rewards you for combat. There's no taking cover or anything like that. You need more ammo, use your chainsaw and cut into a guy. It was things like that. So the level design was great. It brought me back to classic Doom. You had all these corridors, these big wide open levels. They brought back the key cards and things like that. But then they added a lot of verticality too, which we didn't see in the original Doom. You couldn't jump in classic Doom. So, I think that while kind of going back to its roots, it also added a lot of new depth to it. And it also had like a pretty neat story. I know like no one really talks about the story with Doom, And they certainly didn't focus on the story with Doom because they knew that's not why people really cared about it. But it did keep you moving forward. It was neat, and it made the protagonist, Doom guy, the Doom Slayer, this terrorizing, fearful being that like all these demons just like knew like he was like their demise. So yeah, I loved it.
I heard the soundtrack was a little okay.
Oh my gosh, the Doom soundtrack is so insane and so intense, and like I've never played something where it just fit so well into the game, and it was just insane. And there's a documentary NoClip did where they talk with the guy who did the soundtrack, and he literally would just like sit and play sections of the game and then do the music for it to see like how it would fit, and it's just it's unbelievable. But yeah, that's all I have to say. I don't want to say too much more. I think we're good to move on to the fire escape.
Yeah, we're done with video games. Yeah, it's now we move on to the roof of our hotel. We've made it this far. We made it all the way to the top. We've talked about all the things we want to talk about. So now we move on to the fire escape, which is us clumsily shambling down the building through the fire escape, talking about the things that we look forward to in 2017.
Yes. So do you want to start? I have, the tech, and based on our categories, the tech I'm most excited for, the movie I'm most excited for, the TV show I'm most excited for, and the game I'm most excited for.
You go right ahead, Gino. You jump into that fire. You jump off the building.
All right. I'm going down. So tech. I'm most anticipated for the Nintendo Switch. I think that there's a lot of people who are apprehensive. I understand. I love Nintendo. I love Nintendo games. I love handheld gaming. The Switch is everything I really want it to be. I know a lot of people are kind of sketched out because like the Switch, the specs of it, it might play better when it's docked and all this stuff. None of that matters to me. I just want to play new Zelda while I'm going to the bathroom. So I'm excited.
Yeah, that would be really exciting. I'm also looking forward to that.
Oh, I can't wait. My most anticipated movie is the Lego Batman movie. The Lego movie is probably my favorite thing I've ever seen. And this is just a spinoff of that. I even got some Lego Batman movie sets for Christmas, so I can't wait. Some other movies, Spider-Man Homecoming, based solely on, his appearance in Civil War, making me pumped for that. Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Oh, yeah. Love the first Guardians of the Galaxy. John Wick 2. The first John Wick is like just an insane action movie. I love the Fast and Furious movies. Fate of the Furious looks absolutely ridiculous. And I'm pretty excited to see how the new Power Rangers pans out.
That will be interesting.
Yeah. TV shows, probably most anticipated for Iron Fist to see. That's another Marvel Netflix show. I'm excited to see what they do with that. Anxious to see how Stranger Things Season 2 pans out. Hopefully they don't let hype get the best of them. And I'm also kind of excited about American Gods. It's one of the reasons why Hannibal never returned is because Brian Fuller left to work on that. So if it's worth leaving Hannibal, it better be good. My most anticipated game, Prey by Arcane Studios. That E3 demo, to me, I could talk all day about Prey and my excitement for it. I'm excited for it. That's all I'll say. Other games I'm excited for, Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda, Friday the 13th, because I actually backed that on Kickstarter. That's the only Kickstarter project I've ever backed. Horizon Zero Dawn, which is a PS4 exclusive by the guys that made Killzone. Resident Evil 7, just because I think it's really cool to see the direction they're going in. And then Danganronpa 3, because those games are great. Boom. Down the escape. I'm safe.
You made it. He is jumped down to the bottom. He may have broken his legs on the way down.
I broke my arm, so it's my mom.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Hilarious. Nice little inside Reddit joke right there. All right. As far as I'm concerned, technology I'm most looking forward to, honestly, it's still virtual reality technology, VR stuff. I mean, it's still new. Like, it's been out for a year, and even it's actually been out for longer than a year, but only if you're like really into it and got dev kits and whatnot. But I can't not be looking forward to more VR stuff. Really hope I get cool video games. I'm just probably the biggest thing I'm most excited for is a virtual reality MMO. I love MMOs. I absolutely love playing them. I love the camaraderie that exists in the game. Honestly, a lot of times the gameplay doesn't even really matter. It's just the fact that I can play with fun people and have a good time. And I actually tried out a VR MMO recently, a stress test. Like, it's not even in alpha yet. The game's in like pre-alpha, and it's called Orbis VR. It was a ton of fun. The mechanics are awesome. You get a bow and arrow, and you actually have to like notch the arrow in the bow and shoot it, which a lot of VR games actually already do with bows. One cool thing about that game, probably the biggest takeaway from it, was the fact that when you play a mage class, you actually have to draw runes in the air for the spells, which a lot of people thought it was dumb because it was kind of glitchy. Like, you had to draw like an F for kind of an F for a fireball, and it sometimes wouldn't work and sometimes would. But of course, it's glitchy. The game's in pre-alpha. Hopefully they refine it, because I really like the idea of being a mage character where you have to memorize spells. You have to memorize the runes, like in the middle of a battle, in the back lines. You have to actually draw them and throw spells at people. I'm stupid excited for a game like this. Like, I just want it. It was a ton of fun. I hope this game gets developed even further. I think it's really small right now. I feel like the dev team's probably like one guy. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to that technology. In terms of movies, mine are pretty similar to Gino's. I think Guardians of the Galaxy is probably the one I'm looking forward to the most. I really enjoyed that movie. Another big one, Kingsman 2.
Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah,
yes.
I really liked the first Kingsman movie. I didn't know how much I'd like it when I first watched it, but I watched it and I'm like, this is a ton of fun. This is a great movie, and I'm really interested to see what they do with season 2. Like, they can't not address what happened, or not. I say season, but
No, I know what you mean.
There's no way they can't address what happened in the first movie. Like, I mean,
I'm pretty sure Colin Firth's character is in it to some extent. I don't know if they're going to pretend like he wasn't dead, or I don't know.
I'm pretty sure one of the posters even says, like, you thought I was dead, but I wasn't. So it's like, well, that'll be really interesting. I mean, that was probably the coolest line in the movie. It's like, this ain't your typical movie, and he just shoots him in the head, and it was a ton of fun. I expect Kingsman 2 to also be a ton of fun. I know some people have said, like, that like millions of people died in the first one still, even though they stopped the shit from happening, because they still all were fighting each other to the death. So it'll be really interesting. I'm just interested to see what happens. In terms of television, I don't watch a ton of normie TV, so it's hard.
What about anime?
Well, that's the thing, is the anime. As far as anime goes, looking forward to Konosuba season 2. Obviously, it was my third favorite anime this year. So, and that actually starts in like 2 days, so I'm super excited for that. Little Witch Academia, that actually started yesterday, so that's a big one. A lot of people are looking forward to. Saikano season 2. I've waited like 2 years for that one, or maybe even 3 years. It's been a long time. I'm really looking forward to that. My Hero Academia season 2. I'm sure Gino, when he eventually starts watching it, he'll probably be looking forward to it as well. And of course, Attack on Titan season 2 starts next season, so in like 3 months from now. I'm just really excited to just see how big it is, because Attack on Titan is probably by far the most popular anime in the West right now. It's everyone who really starts to even touch on anime knows about Attack on Titan, and it'll be really exciting to watch a show on this big of a scale as it airs for the second time, just with all the hype behind it. I know there's tons of hype behind it, so it's really setting itself up to fail, maybe, I don't know, but I can't not be excited for it. And as far as video games go, I look forward to Overwatch updates. That's about it.
Doomfist.
Doomfist, voiced by Terry Crews. The odor blocker Doomfist. Now Jeff Kaplan's going to be a character as well. I'm sure he's going to add himself to the game. But the new Zelda game with the Nintendo Switch, like, I'm absolutely 100% looking forward to the Switch. I love the concept. Think it's going to be really cool. And the new Zelda game ought to be really fun. It's honestly, that's all I can really look forward to, because in terms of video games, I just don't well, is the new one coming out by Hideo Kojima next year?
No.
Because,
I mean,
probably not.
Death
but
Stranding, I would be absolutely shocked if that came out next year. I don't really know if they've said that's what they're planning on, but yeah, I would say 2018 at the earliest.
Which is unfortunate, but
Yeah.
if only we could still get PT.
As only, yeah.
'Cause,
Well, I think
that in VR would have been insane.
I think there's a lot of what he wanted to do with Silent Hills, I think, might make its way to Death Stranding. I think. The fact that Guillermo del Toro was in that trailer, Norman Reedus is attached to this project, I think he's doing something. But yeah.
All right.
So,
well, I've made it to the bottom of the fire escape.
yeah, I think that's the end of the show. This was an exceptionally long episode. Again, our setup's going to be a little bit different.
Oh yeah.
And I think it'll get better as it goes. It's definitely going to be more of a recent thing. So instead of trying to shove everything that we did in the past year all together, it's going to be we're going to do hopefully bi-weekly.
Yeah, the plan is every 2 weeks have a new episode, talk about new stuff.
So
I think also eventually when we visit each floor, we'll open up a room on each floor, and there'll be a subtopic within the topic to talk about.
Exactly.
Maybe we'll get special guests one day.
We might
get all sorts of viewers sent in questions. Maybe, who knows?
Please.
And it's there's a lot. Only time will tell what happens. Yeah. The front desk will live on.
Well, signing off.
Yeah.
This is Gino.
I'm Mac. And that's it. I
That's
hope you guys have fun.
Yep.